Did you hear that glorious sound? Here it is one more time in case you missed it. If you were a kid in the early 90s, you knew exactly what that sound meant when it came out of your TV speakers. But for my younger viewers out there, let me explain. When you heard that magical chime, you knew you were about to be transported into a quality video game world made by one of the kings of the video game industry, Konami. Now, keep in mind, this is back when Konami was focused on making good games, instead of those dumbass pachinko slot machines that advertise erotic violence and shameless cash-ins slapped together on the back of their most classic franchises. One of the greatest contributions that Konami made to the world of gaming is Castlevania, which came out in all its glory on the NES. Fast forward a couple years and Sega Genesis landed its own exclusive sequel, Castlevania Bloodlines, one of the greatest yet infuriatingly difficult games found on the console. And Castlevania usually involves a member of the Belmont clan picking up the family weapon, a magical whip called the Vampire Killer, and whipping the shit out of all kinds of monsters, usually ending with an insane boss battle against the King of Darkness and most popular vampire of all time, Dracula. And Dracula, like most retro video game villains, is constantly getting killed and constantly coming back to life. Bloodlines neatly follows this Castlevania formula. The story takes place in 1917, and a vampire countess called Elizabeth Bartley is traveling around Europe, causing all sorts of shenanigans in order to bring Dracula back to life. And the Belmont clan lost the ability to use the Vampire Killer whip, so two new vampire hunters rise up to stop the evil from coming back. John Morris, a distant relative of the Belmont clan, and his friend Eric Lacard. And fun fact here, John Morris is the son of Quincy Morris, the character from the original Dracula novel, and seen here in the 1992 film Bram Stoker's Dracula. The game lets you pick between these two characters, which play a little differently from each other. Eric has a spear he can use to poke monsters with, but screw that. This is Castlevania. If there's a whip, that's what you choose. We're picking John Morris. He can jump and whip just like any other Castlevania game, but wait a minute, I can't whip diagonally? Oh wait, I can if I jump. This game came out in 1994. Super Castlevania 4 came out in 1991, 3 years earlier on the Super Nintendo, and I could whip in all 8 directions and even spin my whip around. I mean, come on, the fact that you can't do this is going to get you killed plenty of times in this game, I promise you. Another thing that's going to get you killed is such a common old Castlevania feature. When you get hit, you get pushed back. I can't even begin to count how many times I was hit, bounced back, and fell to my death. And that's something you have to be ready for if you're going to set out on this quest to complete this game. You are going to die over and over and over. I'm over it. I'm not doing it anymore. You better be writing those passwords down too, because you'll need them. Yes, kids, my generation did not have those cute little checkpoints that are sprinkled everywhere now. We had, you know what, let me show you. I don't have the instruction manual for Castlevania, but I do have the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 manual. If we look in the back, there's a section here for notes. We used to have to write down all the passwords in our little instruction manual notepad and refer to it every time we died. That was hardcore. That's how you did it back in the day. Let's take a look at some of the stages and some of the bosses you'll fight. Stage 1. Ruins of the Castle Dracula, Romania. You start off outside and you walk your way to the entrance of Dracula's castle, and immediately I noticed a couple of things. This level is clearly an homage to the first Castlevania game. The hallway looks similar to the one you see when you first enter Dracula's castle, and you even fight the same zombies. I thought this was kinda cool. And once you get downstairs, you also fight the mermen from the NES game that jump out of the water. And eventually you'll make your way to the first mini-boss. That's right, not only does this game have epic boss battles, but mini-bosses as well. This was such an awesome concept back in the day that games don't regularly do anymore. Boss battles used to be everywhere, and they were your test of skill. They existed to make sure that you, the player, were badass enough to continue through the rest of the game. If you couldn't beat a boss, you just didn't have what it takes. And this mini-boss isn't hard at all though. Just stand in front of it and hit it till it dies. But this is an absolute trick meant to fool you into thinking the rest of your journey is going to be a smooth ride. No, the rest of the game continues to get insanely hard, and this first stage really does an awesome job setting the tone for the rest of the game. You'd expect a story about vampires and creatures of the night to be a little gory, and Nintendo at the time, they were very hesitant to have gore or violence in video games, and often they censored games. Look at Mortal Kombat, for example. Here you see the Super Nintendo version, which replaced the blood with sweat. It looks stupid, but on the Sega Genesis, you can easily enter a code that would let you spew gallons of blood in all its glory. So Castlevania fit perfectly in the Sega Genesis. It's noticeably a bit more gruesome than the Nintendo version of the series. I mean, there's bodies ripped in half, dripping blood, and even going back to the title screen, you see a pool of blood as more continues dripping. And you know what? Excessive violence on its own doesn't make a good game. But Castlevania is a horror series, so it should be allowed to be so without risking being censored into oblivion. And after making your way to the top of the staircase, you fight the real first boss, a suit of armor that's alive. Kinda generic, but every Castlevania game has these. He's another boss that's not that hard, as long as you keep your distance. And after the first stage, the game goes in a wildly different direction than most other Castlevanias. Instead of exploring Dracula's castle, you go all over Europe to different locations where monsters are popping up. It's interesting, and it gives the game a little bit of a different feel than the rest of them in the series. Stage 2, Atlantis Shrine, Greece. This level's kind of annoying. It has that old video game section that so many games had at the time where water starts rising and you have to outrun it. Sometimes it's lava in other games. So while you're trying to move through the stage, you're trying to outrun the water while raging minotaurs come charging at you. Then you fight some kind of Aladdin Prince Ali ripoff of some sort. He just teleports around, he summons giant suits of armor for you to fight. Again, like I said, you're gonna see plenty of these guys. They're all over the place. And I can't stand these dinosaur skeleton things that wiggle around and shoot fireballs at you. Since you can't whip diagonally, they're a bitch to hit sometimes, and you better hope you have axes that you can throw at them. I learned to hate these things beyond belief because you know what? They always come up at the most inconvenient times when you're low on health and low on lives. And the real boss of this stage is a big rock monster that keeps hitting the ceiling, making rocks fall down on you. This one's not too hard either. You really just have to make sure you keep hitting the waist until he's short enough to where you can hit the big red eye at the top. Stage 3, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, Italy. This level is where you start thinking, shit, this game might be kinda hard. These harpies keep flying down at you over and over, and I know I sound like a broken record, but if you can just whip diagonally without having to jump to do so, it wouldn't be such a problem. And when you get inside the Leaning Tower, it's kind of cool from a graphics point of view, especially for a game released in 1994. Everything looks like it's leaning over and the background's all trippy. I felt like a dumbass here too, by the way, because there's one section with this big gap. I tried finding all kinds of ways to jump over it and dying over and over like an idiot. All you have to do is whip at the ceiling and swing. But here's the problem with that. The game gives you zero indication that you can even do that. And I actually figured it out by complete accident from rage pressing all the buttons on the controller after I was already at my wit's end. And you can argue that I could have looked that up online, but that's called cheating. A trained video game veteran doesn't do that. There was no Google or GameFAQs.com in 1994. That's how these games should be played. This is where Castlevania Bloodlines really starts testing your patience. Just look at this nonsense. There's floating platforms, and the screen keeps moving. Even if you stop, it keeps moving. So you have to keep jumping from platform to platform while these flying bastard gargoyles fly at you, and you're just hoping and praying they don't knock you off. There's another section of floating platforms with the same shenanigans continuing from before. But once you reach the top, it's not over. You fight the boss, a big bat monster. It flies around and it slowly cuts down your health with its big ass tail. Then it starts bouncing around the tower while everything spins and pulls you towards the edges. It's complete chaos. I had to pause it for a good 20 minutes here to walk away and compose myself because I was getting so pissed. It was insane. Once you die a million times and figure out the patterns, you can send that monster back to hell and move on to stage 4, Munitions Factory, Germany. And the overall design of this level is actually kinda boring. It just looks like a factory and a bunch of skeletons with military helmets jump around and throw bones at you. There's nothing very interesting to look at or play through. And Castlevania games usually have a clock tower inspired level with a bunch of gears. That is what this level here is. The mini-boss here is super cool though, Frankenstein's monster. That's right, the classic Universal movie monster. He's huge, he looks just like what he's supposed to, and has a chain, and electric powers, which makes total sense since he came to life with lightning. But while this stage does have a really cool mini-boss, the end of the stage, they got really lazy with the enemy design. I mean, you enter this room and fight some gears. Yeah, just some gears rolling around the walls and floor. Then after this, a bunch of gears come together and you fight the boss. A bunch of gears that came together and throw some more gears at you. This is a stupid boss, but he does kind of look like something that would fit perfectly in a Vector Man game. Leave me a comment down below if you remember Vector Man. That's another Sega Genesis game I used to constantly rent, but a lot of people don't know what I'm talking about when I bring it up, so yes, leave me a comment below if you played it. Stage 5, Versailles Palace, France. Not much to be said about this stage either. You go through a palace and fight more suits of armor that I talked to you about earlier. Some throw axes at you, some shoot arrows at you, and you fight some more giant suits of armor. But you do face a bizarre mini-boss. It's a hologram with these two faces that pop up and they shoot balls of light that bounce around. And they don't take any damage when you hit them either. I mean, it took me forever to realize that it's the column in the middle of the room that you have to hit before it disappears. So, I mean, once you get that figured out, it's just a matter of avoiding stupid light balls that bounce around. But then you fight the boss, Mothra from Godzilla, apparently. Or a giant moth that looks very similar. But if you have an axe, she's actually really easy. You just throw those axes and she'll be destroyed in no time. And here we go, stage 6, the final stage. The Castle Prosperina, England. So epic, walking in like a badass after going through so much hardship to the final battle with a blood red moon in the background. You're ready to go. And what the hell? I thought my game messed up at first in this part, but no. The graphics are all split up, and you have to maneuver through this weird room without falling through the floor, and those flying Medusa heads are beyond annoying, as they usually are. But once you get out of here and you reach the top of the stairs, you run into the home stretch. The final bosses. Yes, there is more than one. And this is where the game proves how sadistic and heartless the game developers were. This will make or break you as a gamer. In classic Castlevania fashion, you face the Grim Reaper. Death himself is Dracula's bitch, and he is truly despicable. He has these cards that spin around him and you hit them. And once you hit that card, it shows you a boss that you previously fought. You have to fight most of them again, while trying to survive back to back, mostly on the same health bar. I can't even begin to explain how many times I died here and had to restart. And to add insult to injury, after killing all the bosses, you have to face death as he swoops around the screen and chucks his scythe at you. Once again, the axe is my best friend here, and memorizing his patterns is key. Once you take death down, the game is still far from over. After this, you fight Elizabeth Bartley, the vampire from the intro of the game that's trying to resurrect Dracula. And she's surprisingly easy once you know what to do. First time she pops up, she's in some kind of monster form. All you have to do is avoid the fire blast and hit her. Then she starts teleporting from one side of the room to the other, and you just have to hit her real quick before she gets a chance to attack. Rinse and repeat a couple of times, and boom. And no surprise to anybody, Dracula was successfully resurrected. And this battle has 3 stages. The first one is Dracula in his regular looking vampire form. He only takes damage when you hit his head. And he's got different attacks like throwing fireballs at you, and that's about it actually. He throws them in different ways. But when you hit his head enough, he turns into a floating wizard thing, which is incredibly easy. You just jump and hit it a couple times and you beat him. End of game, right? No. No. Dracula transforms into his final form in an infuriating, confidence-draining duel that will leave you as a shriveled failure crumpled on the floor with a game over screen taunting you from above. Or you can do what a real gamer does and pull out every retro video game skill that you've developed over the years and unleash your full power. I have never felt so fulfilled destroying a final boss. I literally had to lay down on my couch after I beat this thing because it took every bit of patience and skill I had in me, and it completely left me drained. Castlevania Bloodlines is easily among one of the best games in the entire Sega Genesis library and is an absolute must-own. But be aware, if you give up easily or have no patience, you will not get very far. And the ending is pretty satisfying too. You get to stand by and watch Dracula's castle, his home, fall apart and turn into rubble. Good luck rebuilding that, asshole! If you enjoyed this video, leave me a like and a comment down below. And don't forget to tune in to GamerThumbTV next Thursday for another episode of Midnight Movies when I review the John Carpenter classic, The Thing. This is Fabian, and I'm out of here. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Later, guys.